possible. This storm is supposed to be here really Wednesday afternoon in the high impacts Wednesday evening, but in order to expedite evacuation and give people fair warning and time, it needs to be as early as possible. I'm hoping tomorrow morning. I mean, we can put that in a request tonight to them.
Yeah, I think we ought to suggest something. It's up to them to make the decision. But and the other thing is, how will people be notified that it's there's no longer evacuation requirement?
We have,
So we will be using many different sources for that. We have the news with us tonight. We will put out information to all the news channels, all the different media. We'll be using our Facebook page. We'll use the county's emergency management website. That is really the best source during any event for information is the county website in the county information center. So we will have it on our website. Again, Facebook is probably the fastest way to get it. We'll put an announcement out on that.
constant contact.
Yes, we use Constant Contact for emails for everybody that's signed up for that.
We also have the condo cam list.
Yes, and we will also be using if this is implemented by the county, we'll use the Shores Alert System, which will send an email and a text and a voice message. If they've signed up for those, it's optional for those. So we'll use every means at our disposal to communicate both the evacuation and the return ability. We don't expect that if the bridge is closed, that it will be closed for a very long time. But with an evacuation, public safety is prepared to be monitoring those properties for the not so good individuals that will try and come over.
Okay, and I have a couple questions. So we announced on the news this evening that we are passing out sandbags. Bring your shovels, although we do have some sandbags with sand that you would have to fill them yourself. And also bridge passes in case that event does happen. Will we follow the same rules that we did during Ian, that for the sandbags you do need proof of residency, but for the passes we will give them to anyone that is on beachside?
Correct. For sandbags, it's Shores residents only, but the passes for any coastal. You check addresses to make sure they are coastal, but yes.
And then my next question is, if we put this into effect tonight.
Question.
Yes, one moment, please, Councilman Bryan. I had one other question. And so this will be our entire 5.5 miles on the east side of A1A.
That is the request, yes.
Great. Okay, Councilman Bryan, what question did you
I
have?
have two questions. Are we the only city that's requesting this, or do we know?
At this point, we are the only ones that I'm aware of. But we are also the ones that I believe were hit the hardest with the largest buildings. For example, Wilbur by the Sea had, I believe, 18 homes impacted, but that's 18 single-family homes. That's a quarter of a condominium for us. So,
And also, Councilman Bryan, if I could add on to that, I did have a conversation with Mayor Paritsky from Ponce to give her a heads up on what we were talking about this evening. They only had 1 or 2 homes that the seawalls came completely down in Ponce Inlet, and those people are no longer in the homes. So those are empty homes right now.
And what entity is going to determine that it's safe to return?
are you talking about return to the city or return to the building?
Return to the building.
We will have our staff out there after the storm, after it's safe for them to get out there, looking at shorelines, and we still make, the chief building official and the fire inspector can make that decision on whether a building is unsafe or not. And just for the record, the word condemned has been thrown around a lot about these buildings. We're not condemning the buildings. We're declaring them unsafe. And for example, the ones that we have declared, if they had done a seawall project and moved, we might have been able to declare them safe to move back into. So just for the record, we're not condemning anything that has a different connotation to it.
So it'll be the city's responsibility then, as opposed to the county's.
Well, ultimately, and I'll look to the city attorney, but ultimately, just like a private home, it's on the property owner to make sure their property is safe. So ultimately, the condo association should really be hiring an engineer. But we're going to look and declare something that we believe to be unsafe. I think there's a big distinction between declaring something unsafe and declaring it safe.
Yeah.
Okay, Attorney Olson, do you have anything that you wish to weigh in on that?
Yes, Mayor, and the city manager is correct. The city has the authority to declare buildings temporarily unsafe. I believe the city has adopted the International Property Maintenance Code, the Standards of that code, to effectuate that purpose. So in the event of a temporary issue where it's maybe uncertain whether or not a structure is safe, the city can go in, deem it unsafe, get folks out, and have the necessary determination to get folks back in. That, there's no scenario where that is a complete blessing over the property or the stability of the property. The primary property owners still have they still have to go in, they still have to do their required checks. There's nothing that the city can do that would effectuate that. They're still at the end, still their responsibility. So what the city manager is saying is absolutely correct. And just because you deem a building unsafe temporarily does not mean, as the city manager stated, does not mean that it's condemned. Those are two entirely separate processes under the International Property Maintenance Code. So there's nothing further that the city manager is absolutely correct on that.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Olson. Is there any other questions? We have any other clarification before we take a vote to pass this?
Madam Mayor, I have a question. City Manager, the passes to get back over the bridge, we obviously know they're available for residents, but what about essential personnel for maintenance folks and condominiums?
Yes, for businesses or staff at a hotel or staff at a condo, we just ask for letterhead from that business or that condo listing those individuals so that we know who the passes go. I also want to reiterate that if you have a pass, it's still good. You don't need a new one. So those passes from 2 or 3 years ago, or the last storm, I think was 18 or 19, that pass is still good. One other thing, Mayor, I want to stress though, that this is our biggest concern is having to do an evacuation in the middle of this storm. Nobody is set up to handle that, especially if something happens when we've said, okay, we're no longer responding to calls, our public safety, it's unsafe for them. What do we do in a building? And that's the worst case scenario that we would face. What happens if there's 100 people in a building, we can't respond?
And unfortunately, during Ian, we did have a couple hours of that the winds were so bad, the rain was so bad, we could not put our public safety on the street.
Correct.
Just want to make sure people know that. So what would this look like? Would this be, so if we do recommend to the county that they declare the mandatory evacuation, so it is Volusia County, would it be sheriffs and our public safety that would work hand in hand to go to the buildings to announce this evacuation, or tell me what it looks like?
It's probably going to be us, meaning city staff and public safety. I have coordinated with the county a little bit about this in anticipation of this happening. And Chief Fowler has stood up, and I think he would like to address that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I spoke with the Chief Deputy.
Sorry, can you say your name?
Sure. Mike Fowler, I'm the Director of Public Safety. I spoke with the Chief Deputy today.
mic's on.
Thank you. I spoke with the Chief Deputy this afternoon, and the at-risk properties in Wilbur by the Sea, they plan to go in person with deputies to let the folks know of the danger and the impending storm. They plan to document anybody who's staying in the homes at this time, and that's without the order. Should we get an order, we'll do the same thing. We'll use, our mass blast, but we'll also go door to door, especially to the high-risk areas.
And we do have our Chief Fowler at the mic right now. Councilman Bryan or Councilman Politis, do you have any questions for our director?
Yes, I do. I just want to clarify something. There's no legal penalty for ignoring a mandatory evacuation order, right?
No, based on the evacuation order, there would not be. However, should one of the buildings be deemed to be unsafe, then that does become a misdemeanor if someone refuses to leave.
Yeah, they would just be staying at their own risk.
If they ignore the mandatory evacuation, yes, they're staying at their own risk.
Okay. Any other questions for our director? Okay,
No, not on behalf of me, thank you.
Thank you. And is there any other questions before we vote on this resolution that anyone has? And then, as always, I'm opening up, we have very few residents in the audience today, but is there any resident that has any question or any concern they would like to address? Okay, seeing none? What about on the dais? Do we have any other questions?
Yes, a technical question. Before we can approve the resolution, we need a number. It's got an XX.
Okay, Sherry?
I had asked the city clerk earlier, and we're just calling this Resolution 2022-Nicole.
Nicole.
Nicole, okay.
So that would need to be in your motion. Just to let the council and the public be aware that you'll see in the resolution, there's a quote from Kevin Guthrie, the Director of Emergency Management of the state of Florida. So I do have a video if you care to see him on the news, but it's basically, the quote is in there, that there's a 50-50 chance that several large structures will come down in the Volusia County area. So we've been in contact actually with the state and FEMA since post-Ian. So they are well aware of our situation. The governor did order an emergency final order amending some of the FDEP procedures for permanent seawall restorations, but unfortunately those measures don't help us this week. But the state is there. If we do have the unfortunate incident of a building coming down, the state will also be stepping in and assisting. They're aware. We're in constant contact with them through Volusia County. So it's not, I just want to say that we have a great relationship with the county, and we're starting one with the state. And but one thing in my discussions with them, that the county will be declaring this at the request of the city. I want to make sure that is clear to all members of the council, that when it goes public, it will be at the request of the city of Daytona Beach Shores. They're declaring emergency evacuation or mandatory evacuation.
And if there is no other city that comes forward to request this, will the mandatory evacuation then remain just in the boundaries of Daytona Beach
It
Shores?
would just be in the boundaries of Daytona Beach Shores, correct?
If there's no other questions, do I hear a motion to accept Resolution 2022, Nicole?
I move that we accept Resolution 2022-Nicole as presented.
Second.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, there was discussion about adding a time. Does council want to add a time to that motion? It's not in the resolution, but we can add that in our communication with.
Okay, I think Councilman Bryan, it was you that asked about the time. Would you like to add a time into this resolution?
If it's the council's desire to have it as soon as possible, I think that should be in there.
And it can be open-ended as soon as possible without a date.
I'll be scanning this and sending this to the county if adopted immediately following this meeting.
And we can have the county set a date.
Okay, so Vice Mayor, can I ask you to change the resolution to include that time frame?
Yes, I so move.
I'm second.
Okay. All right, if there's no other Discussion, Sharon, can you take a vote, please?
Yes, ma'am. Vice Mayor Lindauer,
Yes.
Councilmember Cottamos,
Yes.
Councilmember Politis,
Yes.
Councilmember Bryan,
Yes.
Mayor Miller.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, next we have one other agenda item, and that's we were going to have our organizational meeting on November 9th, and I would be installed as the mayor, taking the oath. We would have, in fact, it's the three that are sitting up here today, Vice Mayor and Councilman Chris Cottamos. So we are asking, because of the impending weather, to cancel the meeting for November 9th and reschedule it to November 15th. And that would have to be at 7 p.m. That's next Tuesday, because it is our organizational meeting. Any discussion on that? No. Do I hear a motion?
I move that
I move.
Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry, Mel.
No, you go ahead.
Yes, I move to cancel the meeting and reschedule it for the 15th.
I second it.
And let's make sure we put in there at 7 p.m. Any other discussion? If not,
Councilmember Politis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lindauer,
Yes.
Councilmember Cottamos,
Yes.
Councilmember Bryan,
Yes.
Mayor Miller.
yes, thank you. Well, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.